the time of the Exodus. Now, when you take a closer look at this particular location, there at the base of this ridge mountain, Jabal Alals, which the Bible refers to as Mount Horeb, you come to a place which is a dry lake bed. Strange when you consider that this portion of Saudi Arabia gets less than 1/4 inch of rain every 10 years. That there would be a lake bed in an area such as this, in an area that gets virtually no rain at all. This area, we are told, is where God brings the nation of Israel, and He tells Moses to go and to strike a rock. And God says that He will reside over the top of the rock, so He knows exactly which rock to go to. Psalm 78 tells us in verse 15 and 16, He split the rock in the wilderness and gave them drink in abundance like the depths. He also brought streams out of the rock and caused waters to run down like rivers. So when we examine that definition, that sounds pretty spectacular, very much like the crossing of the Red Sea. Not something that is going to be obscure or without evidence or foundation. Yet again, we have another demonstration of God, which will be referred to repeatedly in Scripture. In fact, in the New Testament, in the book of Corinthians, we're going to be told that rock was an idiom of Jesus Christ. As He followed the nation of Israel, He was their supplier of both manna and water in the wilderness. Now, in the early 1990s, a family by the name of Jim and Penny Caldwell made some startling discoveries there. I'll give you their website if you want to do some independent research. Their website is www.splitrockresearch. Jim and Penny Caldwell stayed in Saudi Arabia. Jim was there on work for 8 years, and they made 14 different trips to this particular area of Midian. There they found an amazing discovery. There in this dried lake bed was a huge rock. And when they approached it, they saw that the rock, first of all, was the size of a 6-story building, and that it had been split in two, top to bottom. More interestingly, not only was this peculiar rock there split from top to bottom, but at its base there was water erosion. Now remember, less than 1/4 of an inch of rain every 10 years, and yet here at this spot we have a dry lake bed and a rock which is split, and the base of it has this water flaking of the rock. No other rocks in this area. It's primarily granite. None of the other rocks in this area display this peculiar sort of formation. Also, around the split rock, the Caldwells found hundreds of carvings on rocks of footprints. And it's their belief, remember this is an area where no one has ever lived, really. There's no cities or villages that are anywhere near this. It's too arid and too barren to raise cattle. And yet there are all of these footprints carved on rocks. Now at this point you might say, now what's the significance of that? The Bible doesn't make reference to the people stopping and carving their footprints on rocks at this particular location. Well, what's important for you to recognize is that the children of Israel knew that when they entered the Promised Land, God had told them that wherever they placed their foot, God would give them the land. And so it is the Caldwells' opinion that perhaps these markers were the people of Israel preparing to go into the Promised Land by making their own personal markers to be placed upon the land. Now again, as we look at this particular area, the route from the Red Sea up to this area of Mount Horeb, we then see that the camp of Israel that has some really exciting evidence of the Exodus is located on the eastern side of the mountain. So the children of Israel would have traveled around the mountain and come south. Now, why the eastern side of the mountain? Well, it's very simple. You'll notice that anything that is significant in terms of entering into worship, you enter in from the eastern gate. That's the side that faces the rising sun. When the children of Israel have their tabernacle in the wilderness, the only entrance into the tabernacle will be from the east. So this area of the camp of Israel also presents some very exciting archaeological evidence. As we travel to this particular point, we notice that there on the desert, there is a portion of land which is flat and is about 1 mile in diameter. And now you can imagine that's a large enough place for the entirety of the children of Israel to be able to camp quite comfortably in terms of room. Some Bible scholars estimate there could be as many as 2 to 3 million people at this time who are part of this Exodus party coming out of Egypt. Now, if we look at this particular area, we find that following the trail of the evidence associated with the Exodus, of course, we come to the story in chapter 32. Now, this is, of course, after the children of Israel have, Moses has gone up on Mount Sinai, and he has received the Ten Commandments, the design for the tabernacle, and so forth. And in Exodus 32, we have this rebellion in the camp of Israel where they build an altar, and they place upon the altar a golden calf. Now, the Caldwells, in their expedition in the mid-90s, discovered an altar in this area, which is the proposed camp of Israel. This altar is man-made. It is not there by a natural sort of a phenomena. When you look at it from Google Earth, those of you that know how to use this particular program on the internet, there from outer space, you can actually look at photographs of this area. You'll notice this large pile of rocks, and around it is a perimeter fence. After the Caldwells and Ron Wyatt had found this particular formation, the Saudi Arabian government fenced it off and posted military guards there. But what is fascinating about this particular formation is not just that it's a man-made formation, mammoth, absolutely huge, but on the sides of this altar there in Saudi Arabia are these inscriptions of cattle, bovine characters after the god Apis, the Egyptian god Apis. And the side of the altar is absolutely covered with these things. In fact, the Caldwells discovered that there were exactly 12 of these inscriptions on the side of this altar. Now, what's important for you to recognize is that in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabians and the people living in the land of Midian have never been one to worship or to try to depict these cattle-type characters on any of their places of worship. And so this is truly remarkable. These are very similar to the types of inscriptions that you would see in Egypt. And these are there in the land of Midian, inscribed on the sides all around, on the sides of this particular altar there in the wilderness. Now, we also read in Scripture that Moses also built an altar. When we take a look at this region yet again, where the golden calf was, there is another feature which looks like an altar.